In that frame of thinking about your audience and who you might imagine them to be, you tell often this story about being a teacher in Prince George's County as someone who is a product of the Prince George's County school system. Really appreciated the story about a young student who you were trying to convert into a reader and who posed a challenge to you about where are the stories about us? Could you tell us that story again? And who are you thinking about that student when you're writing about supplying those types of reading outlets, the stories about us?
Right. So I was a teacher at a predominantly Latinx school, almost 80% of Latino students. And the majority of them were not on grade level. So although I was teaching eighth grade, students were sixth, seventh grade reading level. They were not at the appropriate stage to prepare to go to high school. And I had one student in particular who I adored. She was hilarious. Like she was the kind of student that real smart at the mouth, right? Like always had some slick to say. But she was not someone who during silent reading time was super interested in the books. And as a reading teacher, that was kind of the goal, right? And for me, I knew that all of the objectives, all of the tests, all of the things that we could throw at a student was not going to prepare them as well as just 10 to 15 minutes of silent reading every day where they just had to sit and focus and work on the skill, right? That is the tried and true. Kids just need to read in order to become better at reading, right? And so I kept trying to give her different kinds of books. And at the time, there were a lot of things that were popular: Hunger Games, Divergent, Twilight. And this kid was not with it, right? She's like, I don't care about sparkly vampires. I don't care about kids killing each other for food. Like, this is not for me. And finally I asked her, like, well, what is it? What would you like? And she said, just like, where are the stories about us? Right. And she's a kid growing up in Langley Park, predominantly Salvadoran population, born and raised here in the US. And this her speech is English that is accented and is slang and is ebonics and is was not the kind of speech that she was seeing in any of these books. And so I thought about it and I went out and I got Julia Alvarez and Jacqueline Woodson and Walter Dean Myers and Jason Reynolds and authors that I thought she would really relate to. And within 2 weeks, this student who had told me she was not a reader, had no interest in that miss, had finished every book I put in front of her, right? And so it became very clear that it was about her entryway into literature. It was about how she saw herself reflected. Because then she looked at me and is like, all right, what's next? And I'm like, what's next? Like, that's it. That's my whole teacher budget. That's all the books. Like, that's all I got. Right. And so it was this moment that I think really galvanized me to, well, maybe I'm next. Maybe the story that I have to tell and the ways that I relate to my students and come from a very similar background and speak in a very similar way, maybe I can offer something that will answer this question of not only what's next, but where are we? And I'll say that I was releasing Family Lore yesterday. It launched, and I did an event here in Washington, D.C., and there's a teacher that came that teaches at the high school where my middle school, where I taught, would have fed into. So the majority of my students ended up going to this high school. And he told me, you don't know how many students I have who had never finished a book, and then I give them your work. And it is a doorway to other books. And so to answer the second part of your question, although I'm not in the teaching world anymore, I don't think of those students every time I go to sit down to write. It is not lost on me the impact that continually be really specific about the young people that I think need to be on the page, knowing that it reaches them and allows them to feel seen.